Hello and welcome back. I'm Dracoya, and today we're going to be talking about our Mark Masclan set for dark skin tones, now found on Dracoya.com within the USA. But before we get into it, make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Using the Mark Masclan set specifically for dark skin tones, we have black skin tone, middle brown, pale carmine red, and shiny skin tone. And next, I want to show you guys a model. Now, I did what a lot of people typically do when they're painting darker skin tones. You just use different shades of brown. And then you're left wondering why it looks so terrible, so lifeless, and just bleh. But now you guys can learn from some of the mistakes, and we can use the Mark Masclan skin tone to invoke some life back into this model. Now, I wanted to show you the setup of my wet palette. First and foremost, we're gonna mix about half and half of the middle brown and the pale carmine red. Maybe a little bit more of the middle brown than the pale carmine red, but you get the gist. This is gonna be our starting point, our mid-tone, and mixing these two colors, they're going to bring a little bit more life and a little bit more blood to the skin tone of your piece. Next, I'm going to create my shadow color, mixing black skin tone and middle brown. Of course, we are going to be using just straight black skin tone, middle brown, and shiny skin tone from the wet palette, but it's important to have these things a little bit pre-mixed just for ease of painting, especially when we get to blending, which I will explain. Side tutorial, we are going to thin down this black skin tone in the same way we're going to thin down all of our paints. I'm going to wet my brush, and using just a little bit of the moisture that's left on my brush, I am going to use that moisture to thin down the pigment, and we're going to check it on my thumb there. If you've never done this before, let me know, comment down below, and I can jump a little bit more into it in another video. So for starters, I want to focus on these shadows within the face. Now you can use this picture here that I found on the internet somewhere, and this is a good reference photo for how you want to shape the volumes and the shadows of your face. Rather than having the light come from straight on, you can see in this attached photo, it's kind of coming from the side. All we're doing here is color blocking, which means I'm going to take my darkest shadow and I am going to block in all the areas using the reference photo where the shadow falls. Next, we're going to take the mid-tone and we're going to paint everywhere the light is applied. Afterwards, we're going to start applying some more highlights and deeper shadows, and we're going to blend the two, but let's hang on for that. So I know that I want to set up my palette for a lighter color very quickly. So I quickly realized I need a lot more paint in order to do this. So again, I'm going to mix that middle brown and carmine red. I'm going to take a good chunk of that and I'm going to put it down below, where I'm going to slowly start mixing in that shiny skin tone until I can get that highlight color that I want. And then I can start adding more and more of that shiny skin tone as we go along, and I want more of a highlight on her skin. Just a little at a time, we're gonna go back and add that middle tone to everywhere that the light is gonna touch. I did pay special attention to the shadows around the eyes and right below the nose and a little bit around the mouth. We're gonna get a little bit closer later, but I, again, really wanted to make sure you guys see my palette because it's important to know what that setup is supposed to look like. Now we're gonna start mixing in some more of that shiny skin tone so that I can brighten up her highlights, and again, just color block the highlighted portion on her face, which means it'll be around her forehead where the light is gonna hit the most, right on top of her nose, on different parts of either part of her cheekbones, also around the mouth, a little bit on the chin. Feel free to pause this video and rewind to take a look at that reference photo I had up just a couple minutes ago. Now that I've color blocked the dark, the mid-tone, and my highlight color, I'm gonna go back to the color that we mixed earlier, where we mixed our middle brown and the black skin tone. And we mixed those two together, and now I can go back and try to just blend that line between my mid-tone and the deep shadow in the face. As you can see, I'm pointing here. For your convenience, as promised, I have included some footage that's a little bit closer just for you. And now you can have a better look of how I've color blocked it. You can see that one cheek is going to have a little bit more of a highlight than the other because the sun is not going to be coming straight into her face. It's actually going to be above her and coming in from an angle, and I wanted to make sure our skin tone resembled that. I have found that I needed another step between my dark shadow and my mid-tone. We had mixed something that was half and half, but maybe I wanted something that was even more in between my mid-tone and my dark shadow. And if you find that when you are color blocking, you're having a hard time going back and actually getting those different blocks to blend together, why don't you give this step a try? Just try to break it down a little bit farther and farther each time, slowly going back and forth, and eventually you will get the result that you are looking for. It is a process, and half of painting is just paint around and find out. But if you want to comment down below if you would like a basic blending tutorial so that you can get better acquainted with this type of technique, let me know. One of the benefits of using acrylic paint is that it is see-through. So if you find that you're painting and you add a little bit too much dark in an area, or maybe you expanded too much of your light, it's pretty easy to just keep going back and forth until you have the surface of dark to light ratio that you really wanted. Again, we want to pay special attention to the detail around her eyes and her lips, as this is what's going to give your model, your face, a much more realistic look. On top of just the skin tones, making sure that all of your light and shadows are placed correctly. When I started color blocking, I only put the shadows on the deepest parts where the shadows were going to be, because it is a lot easier to paint over your highlights than it is your shadows. So I wanted the mid-tone to be anywhere the light would touch, and the shadow was only where a lot of light wouldn't touch, or I wanted it to be at its darkest. And now we're going back to adding some more highlights, adding a little bit more of that shiny skin tone. And this is about 80% of the process right here. Once you have figured out where your color blocking is, then it's just a matter of going back and forth, figuring out where you want your shadow to be, your highlight to be, and mixing the in-between colors to get that to be a very smooth blend. Pro tip, guys, even when you think you're done, set your model aside, come back to it in a couple hours or the next day, and sometimes you're gonna look at it and go, oof, you know, I really need more highlight, shadow, mid-tone, depth, detail, touch-up. There could be a million things that you might see differently when the paint has fully cured and you've had a couple of hours to not look at it. We also want to make sure that these different stages dry before we continue blending. Sometimes if you don't wait until the paint is dry, then you would find yourself just pushing your paint back and forth on your model instead of really blending it. Which is part of the reason in some of these clips I'm going back to my shadows, working from my shadow to my mid-tone, and then I'm going back to my highlight, mixing my highlight to my mid-tone, maybe even adding a few more highlights, a little bit deeper of a shadow as I continue on this blending process. I'm gonna put up that reference photo for you guys just one more time so you can see a little bit more of the details that now I'm starting to work on. You'd want to avoid the mistake where you have a total shadow on either sides of the nose followed by a highlight. The light is coming in from the side, so the shadow of the nose needs to hit mainly one side of the face. You still want to add a shadow to both sides to make sure that your nose stands out and doesn't just blend in with the rest of the face. But when you add the shadow on the side, especially when the light's coming in from that particular side, now you actually have depth to your shadows, a little bit more lifelike, a little bit more reality. I'm pretty happy with how this skin tone is turning out using this Kimera Masclan set, once again found on Dracoya.com along with this model. So if you want to buy the model and the set, you can follow along with this YouTube video. This is only part 1 and we're going to continue on to the rest of the model as well. But I'm pretty happy with how she's turning out. I'm just going to go back to my shadows and add a couple more layers. I really want a little bit more depth. I want her to read as darker. I don't want her to read as something a little bit more in between or lighter. So I really want her to register in that way. I think we're really starting to see some progress now. In a few of the shots, you might have seen that my major highlight got very, very small, and now we're growing and building it back up. This is really, again, just a lovely back and forth at a very small scale. I'm not doing anything particularly special, just going back and forth until I'm happy with how it looks, until I'm happy with the texture on her face or the lack thereof, and until I'm happy with the area and it looks the way I think I want it to. If you guys have any questions, concerns, comments, you know how to comment down below. Make sure you like, subscribe, help support the channel. We would really appreciate it. Once you get to about this point where you're mostly happy with it, I don't think it's done yet, but I'm mostly happy. But now is about the time where you want to start color blocking the rest of the model. So color in the eyes and make them black so that you can see what the shine actually looks like. Because once I start coloring the rest of her, the bandana, her clothes on her torso, her hair surrounding her face, I might be really happy with this skin tone, but once I start blocking in all these different colors, I might see that maybe her skin needs a little bit more shine. Maybe it needs a little bit more depth. And here I've attached the before picture from the beginning of the video so you can really see the difference and see how lifelike she is now compared to what we had in the beginning. And this whole process only took me a couple of hours. If it takes you longer, that's okay. Everyone moves at their own pace, and most of painting is just paint around and find out. But this was just part 1. I will be moving on to part 2, where I'm going to paint the rest of her. If you'd like to get this model on Dracoya.com and follow along. Until next time, guys, but keep painting and find out.